dog had a flashback. A dog had a flashback.
Oh, man. Hills of Eyes, Part 2.
Came out in 1984. Gets a 3.8 on IMDb. Directed by Wes Craven. I love Wes Craven. Wes Craven is probably my favorite horror director. It'd go Wes Craven, Carpenter, Kubrick. I would say Hooper, Cunningham. Well, I don't know if I put Cunningham that high. Clive Barker, maybe. I don't know. The list goes on. Wes Craven is my favorite horror director of all time. Why? Because I love Last House on the Left. Yeah, the cop scenes are silly, but I love that movie. I love it to death. I love how it's shot. I love the story. I love the message. I love the style of it, the documentary style. Love, love, love Last House on the Left. Easily one of my favorite horror films. Hills of Eyes. A review I did, a month ago? The reason why it took me so long to get to this review is because we had to get to Hills of Eyes Part 2 before I talk about the remakes. So I want to talk about these so bad because I'm actually a pretty big fan of these remakes. And I couldn't because I'm like, well, if I just skip this movie, it won't make sense. So I had to review this film, which means I had to watch it again when I didn't want to watch it again. It's a big, long story. But I love Hills of Eyes, the original. Big fan of it. I think it's a great horror film. I've appreciated it more over time. The atmosphere, the idea, the classicness of it. It's a great horror film. Love Hills of Eyes. I love... The big three for me is Serpent in the Rainbow, Shocker, and People Under the Stairs. Serpent in the Rainbow is my favorite Wes Craven film. I love that movie to death. Shocker, a great film. Love it to death. People Under the Stairs, great film. Love it to death. I love all three of those movies. I love Nightmare on Elm Street. That made it to my top 10 favorite horror films of all time. I think at number 10 was Nightmare on Elm Street. That's how much I love Nightmare on Elm Street. I didn't see the other ones like Deadly Friend, Deadly Blessing. I didn't see... What's the other ones? Vampire in Brooklyn, Cursed. So there's still a lot of them I haven't seen yet. But Red Eye. Red Eye with Cillian Murphy. I really enjoy that film. That's a great movie. Underrated as hell. Love Red Eye to death. That's a great thriller. One of my favorite thrillers is Red Eye. Love Red Eye. I even like some of Wes Craven's produced stuff, like Dracula 2000. I know everybody else hates it, but I love that movie. I think it's great, fun, totally 2000s flick. Point is, I love Wes Craven. Rest in peace to him. He's a legend. His work is amazing. He's my favorite horror director of all time. But even he hated this movie, so... He hated it, a lot of the actors hated it, a lot of the people involved hated it, nobody wanted to make this movie, and the only people who wanted to make this movie was the studio. The studio was the only thing that wanted to get this movie out there, And this movie's production history is just so infamous of just being like one of those movies that was barely made. This movie was just barely made. It was held together by duct tape and glue and all that stuff. It barely made a film. And, of course, they shot some stuff in the early 80s, like 81 or 82. They shot some stuff, ran out of budget. I believe that's how it goes. I heard they shot stuff, ran out of budget. The studio canned it for a while. It stayed on the shelf. And they said, well, we'll give you some more money. You can go and shoot some more stuff. Then they said, nope, we'll just put some... Well, they had them go shoot some more stuff. And then they said, well, the rest of it we'll just put in flashbacks. Which is why you have like 4 or 5 flashbacks in this movie. Including one of them by Beast the dog. I'm sorry, man. That's just horrible. It's horrible. And It was barely made. I mean, they just said, well, it took them. It was like started in the early 80s. It took them like 4 or 5 years. Came out in 84, but then it says it got re-released in 85. So this movie was barely made. And it's one of those movies that's weird because you look at it, it's an 85, 84 movie. Does not look like an 85, 84 movie. It's like Chainsaw Massacre 4. It's like this movie. This is a 94 finished film, but it came out in 97. Does not look like 97 at all. But this movie, it just took me a while to get to it, and I promise you guys it was for a good reason. I promise you guys. I swear it was a good reason why I didn't want to watch this movie again. Because watching it again, it was just torture, man. It was torture. And what sucks is that I can see that Wes Craven is doing his best. The actors are doing their best. Everybody involved in this movie is doing their best. Yeah, you didn't really need a sequel to Hills of Eyes, but if you're going to make a sequel to Hills of Eyes, do it the most simplistic, easy way. Which is, I came up with it last night when I was watching this movie. I was like, why isn't it about Bobby and Ruby going back to the desert, battling their demons, they're facing their fears. They go there. You could even have the Reaper character, have the Pluto character, if you really want them. I would do at least 1 or 2 more mutants. That's one of the film's biggest problems, that the 2 mutants are just... They're just nothing. They're just nothing, these 2 mutants. And what I would do is have it be more of, okay, if you want a body count, you want it to be a slasher film, they meet some kids on the way out to the desert. The kids keep bothering them. Hey, can you guys show us a detour? Can you show us a detour? They go, sure, but watch the roads or whatever so you don't get hit by anything. Of course, somehow, some way, they get stopped, and that's how it would go. Just like the teens are there for the body count to get knocked off. Then you have your leads, Bobby and Ruby, which I thought Bobby, the actor, did a decent job in this movie. Pretty good job. I liked his story a lot. And I know that he was supposed to be more of a main character in the original script or something like that, but in this one, the final version, he's just barely in the movie. He disappears. He just shows up and then he's gone. So it was interesting because the Bobby character was done with these demons trying to overcome his fears, and then he just disappears in the movie. It's like, well, it would have been better because Ruby in this movie does kick some ass, but then she just disappears. That's the thing about this movie. People disappear in this movie. They just stop showing up for like 30 minutes. And then, oh, well, there's Beast. Oh, well, there's Ruby. There's that one guy that disappeared for 20 minutes. It's just like... And again, I tried to be positive of this movie. And it does have some great things in it. I will say this. It's not total crap. This is not a movie that I would just say there's nothing redeemable about it. It does. And that's the thing that sucks, is that you can tell Wes Craven was trying his best. There's some beautiful cinematography. Wonderful shots. I will say that. The desert atmosphere is beautiful in the day. You've got shots of the rain, like the long-ranging shots of the hills. And they pretty much recycled the opening from the first movie for this movie's opening. But okay, still a beautiful shot of dawn over the hills. Beautiful shot. The end of the movie where people are walking away, the survivors. Beautiful shot. The desert atmosphere is shot very, very well. And the darkness is lit pretty cool. Has a blue, dark, shadowy kind of tone look to it. Okay. Looks creepy, atmospheric. Wes Craven is doing his best. And the movie looks pretty good. It's shot very, very well. The actors, their acting really isn't bad. It's just the characters are so bland. There's nothing to the characters. Nothing. Absolutely zero. That burp. It's just nothing. It's like, and this is coming from a guy who likes Friday the 13th movies. Part 3, you have Shelley and his girlfriend. You have the lead. You have Paul Kratka. You've got the biker gang, the stoner couple. Part 4, you have the Ted character and Crispin Glover. Part 5, the whole cast. I love that cast in Part 5. The first movie's cast, the second movie's cast, Part 6, Part 7. You can look at all those movies, except for a handful. Like Part 7 didn't really have the best cast, but most of them had pretty interesting characters. Here it's like there's nothing to these characters. Nothing at all. They don't have any funny moments. They don't have any strong moments. The dialogue is nothing. And I'm not asking for Shakespeare. I'm not asking for these in-depth characters. But when your characters have nothing to them and your leads disappear, it's hard to follow the movie. It's really hard to follow the film. And you could just tell it was edited. Like, you could tell that maybe it was certain things were filmed here and there. It's just, you could tell the movie was, I think it was also a very rushed production. Like, it was very rushed. So I feel like if they would have taken their time with the sequel a little bit more, it would have been great. Because it looks good. You could have Michael Berryman coming back, which he looks pretty cool. His costume looks pretty cool. I'll even say that his costume in this movie looks better than the costume in the first movie. Because here he has the Bowie knife, the head, like the thing on his head, the bones, the costume look good. Michael Berryman is doing decent. It's just you're wondering, this guy got his throat ripped out in the first movie by a dog. How is he back? How is he alive? And the plot, before we just keep on rambling, the plot, basically, these teens are going to go out to the desert with Ruby to test this, like, super fuel they made for these bikes, these dirt bikes, which, by the way, this whole movie is sponsored by Yamaha. The whole movie. You're seeing nothing but Yamaha popping up here and there. That's like it's sponsored by it. And they're going to go out there to race their dirt bikes and test out the super fuel. They bring Ruby along, who, for some reason, these kids go by and pick up the dog, the beast dog, which, by the way, the dog looks different. Looks different. You watch the first movie, watch this movie, the dog looks different. I don't know if it's probably the same breed, but it just looks different, you know? And you're wondering, okay, Ruby didn't even know this dog in the first movie, and why would they go pick up this dog? Where is this dog at? It's whatever. It's a small thing. It's whatever. But they just, that's the plot. They go out to the desert because they want to race dirt bikes. They want to hang out in the desert, I guess. They want to go all the way out in the middle of the desert. I'm wondering, why don't you just go out to, like, the outskirts? Like, that'd be good enough. They go all the way out in the middle of the desert to race their dirt bikes, basically. And I'm like, why though? Like, why? Like, why would you go all the way out in the middle of nowhere, where there's no gas stations, there's no help? You're pretty much just begging for something to happen. If you're just gonna go out to the middle of the desert, oh, we just want to race our bikes. Do it on the outskirts. Do it somewhere else. Don't go out in the middle of the desert. Like the first movie. I guess you could say, well, they went out in the middle of the desert. They had taken a detour they didn't know about. Yeah, it was a mistake, but here it's like they're doing it willingly. Going right out in the middle of the desert. And why is Ruby going back out in the desert after this just happened to her? Why would she go back out there with, like, seemingly no second thought, just, oh yeah, I'll go with you guys, knowing that there's this past shit that happened out there? And I get it's because, well, they're all dead. Still, it's like she just goes out there again. But the Bobby character stays back, I guess, because he just disappears. He can't go. And it's like, okay. So, and again, the shots leading out to the desert, beautiful and everything. But basically, the teens get there. There's the stupid scene where they drive. I don't know why they're driving this bus out there in the middle of a rocky terrain desert. They take I don't know how they got the school bus looking thing. I don't know. But they drive this bus out there, and the bus hits a rock on the bottom of it, and it's leaking gas. And they run out of gas in like 3 seconds because it hits the rock. The gas is poured out the bottom of it, and then it's just empty. All that gas leaked out in like 3 seconds. Again, a small problem, I know, but I just noticed it. It's very obvious in the film. They're stranded. Michael Berryman shows up in broad daylight and attacks them and gets his ass kicked. Then he goes back up to the hills. Then he comes back down again in broad daylight, gets chased away again, gets his ass kicked again. This character gets his ass kicked through the entire film. There's not one strong moment in this movie for the Pluto character. In the first movie, he was a very creepy looking character and very menacing. He was creepy, he was menacing, he was taken seriously. Here, it's this movie, he's a joke. And Michael Berryman's doing his best. I like the scene where him and Ruby they had this confrontation, and he's getting ready to kill her, and she says, "You kill me." Beast gets angry. He's like, "Who's Beast?" "That dog that did this to you, that teared your throat out." He's like, "Oh, great moment." Michael Berryman does great in this movie, but the character has nothing to do in this movie. So I'm wondering, you bring him back, by the way, just to kill him off again, when he had nothing to do in this film. Nothing at all to do in this film. He literally doesn't have one strong moment. All he does is run, get his ass kicked, and then die by the dog. That's it. He has maybe one cool scene with Ruby, the confrontation scene, where he has her, he's talking to her, but that's like one scene to the entire film. One scene. And the kids, it's nightfall, they get knocked off one by one. It's trying to be a slasher film, but it's weird because it's like you barely see the death scenes, it cuts away a lot, or I swear to you there was more teen characters in this movie, but they just disappear. I could have sworn there was more teens in this movie, but they always disappear. And the death scenes, they're not really anything special. I mean, a machete, slash to the throat. She finds this guy with like an axe in his head, which I swear is like Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. That movie, remember when Shelley falls out of the closet as a prank with an axe in his head? Same thing in this movie. Literally the same angles and shots of it. I don't know if it was from that or inspired from this. I don't know, but it was very much the same looking shot of a guy falling out of a closet with an axe in his head. Only in that movie it was a prank. But, and I don't mean to be negative with the film. I don't want to be. It's just, I will admit it has great things in it, but when you're having this many issues, it's hard to ignore. And then you have the teens be knocked off one by one. It's very boring. It's very slow. Nothing really happens in this movie. The Michael Berryman is saying how there's the Reaper, and you're wondering, what's the Reaper? Who's this Reaper character? The Reaper is played by Kane Hodder, and Kane Hodder does the best he can, but this Reaper character literally has nothing to him. Literally the most generic mutant bad guy you could ever make. I'm not even kidding you. The makeup is nothing. Just a little thing right here of makeup to deform him. His outfit, his character has no lines, no dialogue, except for Ruby, which you're going to hear about 1,000 times in the movie. It says it over and over and over again. But he has no, he's not any menacing dialogue, any witty dialogue, any nothing. There's no dialogue that really stood out to me. It was all just bland. The character has nothing to him. Like Papa Jupiter in the first movie, "I'll eat the brains of your kids. I'm in, you're out." That speech, when he terrorizes the group in the trailer, and he's terrorizing them. He's on the walkie-talkie, just teasing them and taunting them. Good character. Here it's like the Reaper, he just doesn't do anything in the movie. That's what it is too. He doesn't do anything in the movie until the very end. And then the only thing he does is bear hug somebody to death. And he also gets his ass kicked by the blind chick, which, by the way, this blind chick, it's cool It'd be an awesome idea if this blind chick was a legitly well-written character and could kick these people's asses. But this character has nothing to her. She just this blind chick who, for some reason, knows all the answers, knows what's going on. She doesn't literally know that, but she can tell whenever somebody's around or something's going on. She's like really psychic. She knows. Apparently, she knows kung fu, but she kicks these people's asses all throughout the movie. And, you know, it's cool and everything. It just, the character, if it was done well, it'd be cool. It's not done well in this movie. It's not. It's really laughable. You're seeing your bad guys, the villains, get beat up the entire movie. There's no strong moments of dialogue. There's no menacing moments of the characters, dominating these, teens and, killing them. And you don't get any of that in this movie. They're just laughable villains. And Michael Berryman and Kane Hodder do their best. But the way they're done, written and done, it's not done very well. And there's also the stupid death scene where, machete in hand, he swings, hits a guy in the head when he has a helmet on. So it doesn't kill him, obviously. Gives him a gash, but doesn't kill him. I'm like, what are you doing? The guy has a helmet on. And the movie ends because you've got the leads. Ruby disappears. Beast disappears after killing Michael Berryman. Decent shot, good stunt of a guy falling off of the hills down below, down to the ground. Great stunt, shot very well, but it just makes you go like, Michael Berryman literally had nothing to do in this movie. Literally had nothing to do. They brought him back just to kill him again. And you have Kevin Spacey in this movie, who is also in Friday the 13th: A New Blood. He's the lead, Roy, but also he disappears throughout the movie as well. But I guess him, the blind chick, they rig this trap that it basically blows up Kane Hodder's character, the Reaper. And it was a good stunt. It was like a really intense fire stunt of Kane Hodder's on fire. He runs. The blind chick just steps to the side. He falls into a mine shaft. And it's like these bad guys don't have any menace to them. They don't have any menace. They just... Oh, man. And it could have been a cool character. The Reaper, this big, badass mutant guy. I mean, they kind of did it the same way in Hills of Ice 2, the remake, but, it could have been a cool character. Michael Berryman coming back, could have been a cool character, done well, These things done well would have been amazing. That's what I mean. If it was given some more time for the script, if it was given more time for the production, I feel like it would have been a pretty good sequel. But, I know I've been rambling a lot. We're about 23 minutes into the video. We're at 23 minutes, so I just gotta end this, because if I don't, I'm gonna ramble on and on and on. But the problems, you got a lot of stupid stuff in this movie. You got them, first of all, taking a bus out to the desert just to race some bikes. Like, dirt bikes. There's no good reason to go out in the desert. They just go out and do it. Ruby goes along for some reason. The bad guys, the villains, had nothing to do. They just get their asses kicked the entire movie. The characters are really, really bland. The movie's really, really slow and boring. There's not a lot of progress in this movie. Progress, the plot, or progress in the running time. It's just a very slow movie. Very slow moving film. Very boring and very much a chore to watch. It's just very slow. There's just stupid ideas. Like, this guy is in between a cliff of the hills. What do you... Like, knowledge 101. Basic fucking common sense. You're in the middle of these two cliffs. Steep abyss in these cliffs. If you yell, obviously something's going to crash down in the cliff. The guy yells. And what happens? He kills himself. Rocks fall and crush him. It's like if you're in Mount Everest. You're not going to scream at the top of your lungs because you know an avalanche is going to happen. Here it's the same thing. The guy screams his lungs out and goes, "Ha ha, you didn't get me," and the rocks squash him. They squash him. Um, Other things, the ending really isn't anything much. The plot doesn't really progress. There's no really new things in this movie besides the Reaper. It doesn't do a whole lot story-wise. It's just a movie you could tell nobody really wanted to make. And it really comes across. And I know there are fans of this movie. There are people who actually love this movie. That's cool. I wanted to love this movie. I wanted to go in with the positive mindset. It's like Alien 3. I tried to go into the positive mindset, but still just, you know, I just got to be honest. I went into the positive mindset, came out, and I was like, dude, it's just, it is what it is. But Wes Craven hates this movie too, so even he would agree with me. He hates this movie. Wes Craven hates it. A lot of the actors hate it. Nobody wanted to make it. The studio wanted to make it just to make some money, which it didn't. I don't think it did. I think it bombed. Maybe. I don't know how much money it made. It made, says it's got a budget of $700,000, but it's not giving me the budget that it made back. So I don't know if it was a bomb or not. I know critically it was a bomb. It was just torn to shreds. And Wes Craven also hates. He disowned this movie. That's how much he didn't like this movie. He disowned it. He didn't even want his name to be involved with this movie at all. But the studio, I guess. The only positive about this movie is that, and there are some positives in the movie, but the only positive that came out of this movie was Wes Craven made this movie to get the budget for Nightmare on Elm Street, which he would go on to make. And Nightmare on Elm Street is a great film. I love Nightmare on Elm Street to death. That's a great film. As I said before, it's in my top 10 favorite horror films list. So at least we got that. But before it goes into 30 minutes long, a lot of stupid stuff in this movie, like the characters in broad daylight starting a fire, in broad daylight, in the middle of the day, in the desert, they're starting a fire. But yeah, it feels like it's ripping off other horror films, like Chainsaw Massacre, because of the way they get the bones in the trees and the dark houses and stuff like that. It's just, but I will say this: I want to end the video at least on a somewhat positive note. The movie is shot well, directed well. Everybody in the film is trying their very best. Wes Craven, the actors, the camera work, trying their best, but it was just too rushed. This film was just too rushed. It was not given enough time to go into a proper production. And it was also just one of those movies where it was shelved, then just barely released. Like, barely released. The movie's barely... It's an hour and 26 minutes. The credits are like 4 minutes long. So it's barely a movie. It's like maybe an hour and 20 minutes without the credits. So it's a very short movie. That's a positive, too. It's a very short movie, but it's still boring. It's still slow. But yeah, Wes Craven, great director, tried his best. Everybody in the movie tried their best. The Ruby character tried. Kevin Spertus tried. Pretty much everybody in the cast was trying. They're not bad actors. It's just very, very rushed production. Very, very rushed. But like I said, and the Harry Manfredini score isn't bad. It's just it's weird hearing it in a Hills of Eyes movie. I will say that. Great music, but in a Hills of Eyes movie, it just feels weird. But overall, I'm sorry this was 30 minutes long. I didn't want it to be 30 minutes long, but I had a lot to talk about this movie. But yeah, I'm going to give it probably a 2.5 out of 10. It's a horrible film. I'm not a fan of it at all. I'm glad this is over. I'm glad that we can move on to the remakes. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching my review on The Hills of Ice Part 2. I'm going to give it a 2.5. Let me know in the comments below your guys' thoughts on this film. Thanks so much for watching. Sorry it was such a long review. I didn't want it to be, but had a lot to talk about in this film. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Sorry it was so long. Thank you for your patience. You guys are awesome. I want to say thank you guys so much for the support and everything. I really appreciate it. But anyways, guys, my review in The Hills of Ice Part 2. Thanks for watching. Take care. I'll see you guys later. The Explorer of Horror is out. Peace.